Hey y'all, my name is Casual Rotmg, and I wanted to start this channel to better document my feelings about life and my journey through it. I love to play Realm, and I'm trying to get better at it consistently. I like reading, writing, enjoying music, playing video games, and tons of other hobbies that I tend to dip my toes in, but never really get the chance to fully explore my interest in them. But today I did want to talk about a few things on my mind. Mainly the first one being, why do I want to make videos? This is rather a tough topic to tackle because I tend to get caught up in the idea of making videos as something that's fun and creative that I can finally put effort into, because the other end of that would just be playing video games all day or playing on my phone all day. So it's almost out of spite that I want to create. That's not to say that I'm angrily creating content so that I'm not caught up in the cycle of doing nothing for days or weeks or months. I like to reflect back on the videos or the music that I create and feel good about that. I think it's important that whenever you have accomplished a goal, that even when it might not have turned out the way that you hoped it to, you're still celebrating it. A flaw I tend to have is creating too quickly. I have a hard time of holding that spark of inspiration that I had when I began working on the project. On that topic of creation, I was having a conversation with one of my friends, and he had brought up something that really impressed me. He expressed that he had an interest in drawing Pokemon-like sprites for a game that he was planning on making. His idea for the game was similar to Pokemon, where you have your starter region, but this region of land was split in half, and one side was the Chinese dynasty type setting, and then the other side of the region was more so like a Greek or a Roman Empire. The story would be about how the monsters from either side of the region would harm the ecosystem if they were outside of their native location. So if a monster was from the Chinese dynasty side but had infiltrated on the Roman side, then it would be invasive to that ecosystem. The main enemy in the game would be both sides' wildlife rangers and, parks and recreation, bodies of government, since they would want to eliminate the invasive species of monsters from their side of the region. I had a few questions to myself when I was reflecting on this. Namely, first one being, why is this interesting? It's refreshing to me because this person doesn't have a lot of interests in doing anything besides video games. So when he told me this, I felt like I really needed to encourage him to pursue this idea, because I know that this interest of his is very attainable, and there are plenty of resources online that he can use and learn how he can execute his vision. The second question I had was, what can we learn from this? And so something that I'm taking away from this experience is that people do have the capability to get outside of their normal routines and actually try to pursue an idea that they have. Now this idea hasn't exactly kicked off yet, so it's hard to say if it will, but with the attitude that he had when explaining this vision to me, that's enough proof for me to know that he will take the first steps in making this dream of his a reality. Another question I had was, how exactly is this different from my point of view? The main reason that this is different from my point of view is that with the amount of depth that he had for this idea of creating sprites, I would have already accomplished several steps of this. Not to say that that's a good or a bad thing, but I would have already bought a drawing tablet. I would have seen a few YouTube videos on how to do simple design creation, specifically for Pokemon type monsters. I would have already had some rudimentary drafted designs that wouldn't see production, but it's a start. So is this a better way of approaching his idea? To me, it's a lot faster, but if you think about it, he's actually had more time to marinate in this world that he created for these monsters. He sees beyond the first steps of designing a character and is looking at the full picture of how these monsters would interact inside of a story. The vision is more complete in his mind, but in theory, since I've jumped into the thought of designing monsters for a future story, and that'll come later, I potentially might lose sight of the goal of drawing the sprites. And I might lose interest altogether, and then it's back to square one, and what's the next interest? And another question that I had was, how does this tie into my creation of art? This conversation that I had makes me want to have a full vision of what I want this channel to be about. I enjoy the people in my life. I love to listen to their stories, and I love to compare these stories to my life and think about what I can learn from them. I believe that in every conversation you have with people, you can take something productive out of it. Whether it's your neighbor or your family member, the cashier at a coffee shop, hell, even old people. I'll make another video about how important true active listening is and how it can improve your life, but just something to ruminate on. Last weekend, my friends and I got together to present each other with PowerPoints we each created in about various topics of interest. I had presented an avant-garde fashion designer named Carol Christian Pohl, and some of my friends did their favorite video games, insects, and one of them did it about Wikipedia. A topic that struck me when listening to the presentations was my friend Tony. His presentation was about how to talk about Kirby lore and other various topics to your friends. The presentation focused on the execution of bringing up your interests to other people to talk about. Whether they're an avid fan or a complete stranger to the topic, Tony illustrated that there's always something in common that ties your interests that you can use to talk about. The main reason he brought this to our attention was to prevent us from bringing up our interests to, say, an unsuspecting person and risk boring them or taking it at face value that they wanted to hear our rambles, but just trying to be polite about it. People want to talk about themselves, but not everyone wants to listen to people talk about themselves. Making that connection to each other's interests makes it feel like the conversation is about both of you. It's engaging. The way I feel about this is that it's not always the fault of the speaker when the conversation becomes boring, but the listener not participating in the dialogue can occasionally also be at fault. If you are slightly tuned out and nodding and saying right, right at all the correct moments, that isn't enough to make the conversation fun. As I said earlier, I'm going to make a future video talking about the advantages of listening to people and why you should be a better active listener and how you can be a better active listener. But once everyone had presented, I had given an ending speech to the group about how much of a good time that I had and hoped that they also had. And I gently mentioned how nice it felt to give a presentation about something that I actually cared about as a serious topic, and seeing everyone genuinely interested in it. Because I was initially planning on presenting not a very serious topic and trying to be a little bit more comedic in the presentation, it was going to be about an alignment chart. So like lawful good to chaotic evil, about how certain people handle straw wrappers at a restaurant. Sounds kind of insane, but I tossed around the idea of it, and it sounded pretty funny to me, but I ultimately ended up going with the fashion designer presentation because I felt that it was a chance that I could be genuine and show that I have a genuine interest and show my knowledge in it. I do have insecurities when talking about subjects that I'm interested in, just because sometimes I have a fear of people not caring of what I have to say. But I'm glad I took a gamble, because looking back on it, it kind of feels funny to call it a gamble, since the outcome felt so assured after everyone enjoyed it, almost like it was inevitable. I wish I had the same delusions that some people had when talking about their own interests. There is a certain envy that I have with other people that have high levels of delusions when thinking about what they can achieve in their life. I'm personally very critical of my own work that I produce, but I'm starting to believe that that's a normal occurrence for most people. Individuals who are assured in their victory for anything they set their mind to, but especially their passions, have a shocking amount of consistency when viewed as a spectator. So, why is this a good trait to have? Being delusional might not be as bad as it sounds, and a vast majority of people just stop working on their passion projects because they aren't seeing the results that they want. If you kept failing over and over again, then why keep trying? You're not getting the results. And that's where the strange advantage of having a childlike wonder invested of what you want your goals to be and what you want to make of yourself. Quentin Tarantino spent 6 to 8 years writing screenplays before his big one really caught on, Reservoir Dogs, in 1992. And that even goes to show that, wow, that's a really long time persevering, believing that you are going to get a hit. Because if you do look back at those interviews, he is completely assured of himself that, yeah, it was inevitable that I was going to be, a hit director. And he was going to see success. But to have that for 6 to 8 years, I don't know if I could do that. And there is some part of me that does wish to be that delusional in not only video and content creation, but just every aspect of my life. To have that confidence of, yes, what I'm doing is the right path, and I'm going to make it work no matter what. That takes some serious dedication and a serious amount of delusion. So who's to say that that is a flaw to have? Because is it a flaw? I think that if you look back on it and saw no success, then it would be a flaw. But if you look back on it and you did have success, then that same flaw would be considered a good trait to have. Determination. It's kind of funny. Determination versus delusion. Where does the line come in? And talking about these interests of mine to my friends and trying, quote unquote, trying to be more delusional in my interests and really believing that I can do them could really help me actually commit to my goals. It's inevitable. It has to happen. I will become Mr. Beast. I am Mr. Beast. But in all seriousness, I do want to apply those techniques of delusion into my own interests in my life, not only content creation, but also, my job and my, future interests that come up, and having that quality of delusion mixed with skill, mixed with luck. I think it almost seems like anyone can succeed with that ratio. Well, give or take on the numbers, but those seem like core ingredients for becoming successful. And you can even tie this back to Realm of the Mad God and The Shatters and Moonlight Village. And if you can't do it, then O3, because, there is no delusion for me when playing Realm. Well, the delusion could be that if I play Shatters, I know that I'm going to die to Twilight Archmage in Fire Finale, because I've never made it past that. But maybe there's also a different delusion that I could apply. That's, even though that I haven't beaten Twilight Archmage, I'm gonna beat Shatters. It's just going to happen. And I think that would happen regardless, even if I just kept trying blindly and getting better and better at the game. But that's just another instance where delusion/determination could be applied. Moonlight Village, though, is impossible, and no one could beat that. And I'm surprised that no one has actually beaten Moonlight Village in this game yet. But I think reflecting on this topic has really reignited my interest for speaking to others, and also really believing in my interests, and even both speaking to others about my interest. I do think that it's interesting to apply these ideas of delusion and of taking others' ideas, full stop, of taking others' ideas and seeing how they're applying their ideas, and learning from them of how to believe in your ideas, and just being more comfortable sharing those ideas. I think that if you ever want to create something worthwhile and create something that is truly good, it does depend on how much you believe that that is good. I think that if you do believe that in what you're doing is good, and not outright delusional, like some level of competency for what you're doing, but I think if you do have that vision of what you're creating and what you want your creation to become, and what you want, not what you want, but how you want your goals to execute, I think that success would look very plausible. And for people out there that are viewing this and are feeling a similar way to me about creation and about their goals, maybe it would also do you a bit of good to have some delusion in those goals. If you really do want to succeed, and you really do want to execute what your vision is. And if you're feeling stuck on well, I don't know what I want to create, or I don't know what my goals are. I think just sitting alone with your thoughts, or really thinking about it for the week and trying to set those long-term goals of what you want to do in life and what actually makes you happy. Once you do identify that, working backwards to what you want to actually produce creatively or physically or even spiritually or anything like that nature, I think that that's a really wonderful step that you can take in your life. I think that's what everyone should be doing at the end of the day. Isn't that why we're all here? We're all here to be happy, right? Well, I guess it's subjective. We're here because whatever you want to believe, but I think we're here to be happy, and life would be a lot better if you were happy. But maybe that's a pretty simplistic way of looking into it. But for now, it's 1 a.m. I've got to go to bed. I'm Casual Rotmg, and I'll talk to you later.
We back. Yo, what time is it? Past time.